You are listening to Next Gen Environmental Firm, the podcast that unpacks how environmental and sustainability-focused companies actually run, scale, and compete. We talk with the founders, CEOs, and technical leads who are solving real bottlenecks, building resilient teams, and using smarter systems to stay ahead in a fast-changing market. Today, we're talking with Bru Pearce from Envision, a team tackling a huge challenge, helping the planet heal by making restoration something the economy can finally support. They are building tools like Whole Earth Accounting and the Empathy Token to help the world invest directly in the healthier biosphere. Welcome, Bru.
Thank you. So kind of you to have me.
My pleasure. So let's dive in. Bru, imagine we at a relaxed dinner party and someone asks you, what's the origin story behind Envision? What was the moment you realized the world needs a whole Earth system plan, not another climate initiative, but full biosphere restoration strategy?
Well, that's a gradual realization. The first realization was that the climate change issue was serious. And that was a big slap about the face because I was building a big marina project in Grenada in the West Indies, and we got hit by Hurricane Ivan, Category 5 storm, in an area that was supposed to be below the hurricane belt. And that was devastating for the island and a business disaster for us, which took some time to recover from. That was 2004. By 2008, the island was recovering and we had the project underway that was resolved. But that led me, and the recovery process for the island was important. Resilience against such things and the realization that were happening. And behind that, a long career in coastal resort development and constantly being asked by planners, what allowance was I making for sea level rise and climate change? And saying, well, how fast, how much? No one could give you an answer. So the first version of Envision was set up at around 2009-10, and we were focusing on sustainable solutions for small island states. Lots of interesting areas like educational tourism and clean energy systems and all of those things. I found myself back in the UK in 2011-12, looking at clean energy, waste to energy systems, and in particular advanced pyrolysis. Pyrolysis is heating of a substance in the absence of oxygen until it breaks down, and it produces char. Black stuff. If you leave the roast chicken in the oven and forget about it, you come back and you just have this black bird. That's the carbon that's been charred. The interesting thing about char is that it's in organic matter. If you char something, it's the rapid process of making coal, and it has all sorts of interesting uses, but it's a great way of drawing down carbon. However, that led me to talk to a chap called James Lovelock. And James Lovelock is the father of Gaia theory. And Gaia theory looks at the whole planet as a single living organism, which is really interesting. Everything is integrated. And in fact, when you think about it, the planet, 4.2 billion years old or thereabouts, life on it for just around 4 billion years. And actually that planet 4 billion years ago would have been completely alien. You couldn't have lived on it. You needed a spacesuit. But living things have built everything we know. Nature colonizes and stabilizes as it goes along. And as nature evolves, it evolves its environment with it. So that's a whole interesting story, but it's key to understanding that our home is built by that integrated web of life. We're a part of it. And then we got deeper into this. I got involved in trying to finance a film about climate change, which we came very close to doing. But in the end result, we went to a commissioning meeting and it was turned down on the basis that it was too politically hot to handle. So climate change has been an emotive question, and it needed a lot of understanding. So Envisage then started digging deep into trying to deal with those two key questions: how bad and how fast. And in so doing, understanding how the planet works, the biosphere being that thin membrane that surrounds this lump of space junk that we live on.
Right.
You know, our world is the remnants of other solar systems and star structures that have gone through their life cycle and collapsed, and that's how the elements are here. And the living things have taken those bits of space junk and through molecular engineering, which is what life does, they've built everything around us. So that deep understanding that it was life that was doing that, and life constantly is looking to colonize and stabilize.
Right.
We then started looking at the big reason of why we have a climate change and environmental degradation problem. Oh, and the problem is deep, and no question about it. We have polluted the atmosphere dramatically. We have completely changed the radiative balance of the planet. So there's more heat coming in from the sun than there is heat radiating back out. That's the greenhouse effect that everybody will have heard about, carbon dioxide being the lead gas in that, but additional water vapor is part of that, and there are other substances that are in our atmosphere that have made that change. Now, on a healthy planet, and if we look back at the world and consider the last 600,000 years, the ice age cycles are about 100,000 years long. And everything you see around you today has evolved through that ice age cycle situation. So think of that 100,000 year cycle rather like summer and winter. To balance it out, those living things working in an integrated way actually have mechanisms that enable them to control the climate. And they do that by releasing small particles, both plants, trees, grasses, fungi, and in the oceans, phytoplankton, all are involved in the evapotranspiration process.
Right.
This is the circulation of water. Water evaporates, goes up into the air, and forms clouds. But every cloud is made up of millions and billions of tiny droplets. And every one of those droplets to form has to have a nuclei. And those little particles, the diethyl sulfide that comes off the ocean, and the various molecules that plants give off and fungi give off, that rise up with the evaporated water, is how those clouds form. And depending on the number of and the size of those microparticles, depends on the nature of the clouds, how bright they are. I think you probably know this. You look up in the sky and you see a dark cloud and you know it's going to rain. Dark clouds, big droplets. White clouds, little tiny droplets. That incoming solar radiation, when it hits those clouds, if they're very bright and white, it reflects away. And if they're dark, it rains. And those living mechanisms enable living things to control the overall temperature of the planet, all interlinked. And that interlinkage is becoming better understood because we're now beginning to discover that through quantum biology, quantum computing, quantum science, all these things, this is the micro level functioning that goes on. But with quantum physics allows for particles to interact at great distance. Mechanisms by which a fungal spore that's come off an oak tree somewhere in the northern hemisphere may be interacting with a phytoplankton in the middle of the oceans, or a krill in the southern ocean, or you name it, that interrelated web. All forms are climate management engine. So it's a climate control system. The impact of 10,000 years of civilization's development has resulted in more than half on the life of the planet being lost. So this is the loss of the great forests. In the UK, in your history lessons, you learn that when the Romans arrived in Britain 2,000 years ago, it was nearly all forested. If you go back 3,500 years, most of the Mediterranean was forested. The whole of the North African coast was a forest that was 1,000 miles long. We've done this when the humans arrived in the various continents. They moved down through the Americas into South America. In South America, they reduced the amount of forest dramatically early on. This is the Aztecs index and the natives, first people that were there. Interestingly enough, when the Spaniards arrived in South America and they introduced European diseases, there was a massive die-off. And you can see in the atmospheric records that are trapped in tiny microbubbles in the sea ice that CO2 levels suddenly dropped. This was a result of the regrowth of the forests that occurred because all of those South American cities were lost in the jungle. Okay. So it's just a little bit of evidence demonstration behind it. Anyway, recognizing that and that we've reduced the capability, the size of that engine, the resilience of the engine, you have to add that to the obvious damage that's being done through the release of greenhouse gases and the pollution that goes into the oceans and the rest of it. All of these things, as well as directly adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, are reducing the capability of nature to control the planet's temperature. There comes a point where the planet gets overwhelmed. This is not unlike ourselves. We control our temperature within a tight range.
Right.
As it gets hotter, our blood vessels dilate and we sweat to control our temperature. If the temperature rises too high and the humidity rises too high, we hit what we call that wet bulb temperature, and you can no longer survive. It's just beyond your capability. And that's where the planet is heading at the moment. And in fact, the big, really nasty climate change impacts that we're going to see within the next few years will be large areas exceeding the wet bulb temperature, the survivable temperature and humidity levels. And very large numbers of people will not survive that. Um, that also applies to crops.
Okay.
Crops will fail, and there's a likelihood of a global food crisis. In fact, on our current course, if we don't make significant changes, that is going to happen. We will have lots of feedback loops which start pushing temperatures higher and higher. The weather becomes more and more extreme, as we can see it at the moment. And the whole of our civilization, everything we've achieved, is at risk.
How many years do you think that will happen if we don't make any change? In how many years you expect that,
On our current course, within 5 years, we will see really significant effects. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a global food crisis developing within the next 3 years.
Wow, that's
it is really serious. This is because of the feedback loops that are happening. So by feedback loops, what do I mean? We are losing the Arctic sea ice. The top of the planet. Where's my world? Here's my little world. Right. Top of the world, this bit up here, which is covered in ice, is highly reflective. And it's reflecting away those sun's rays that I talked about earlier. As you reduce the amount of ice up here, there's less reflection. More sunlight goes into the Arctic Ocean and warms it.
Oh.
And as a result of that, the land around it, the permafrost melts. And in the permafrost, through the whole of the top of Siberia and northern Canada, there's lots of organic material which breaks down into carbon dioxide and methane, powerful greenhouse gases which are released into the atmosphere. And so it gets hotter. And it gets hotter up there where the ice is, and the ice melts faster, and there's less ice, and more open water, more heat is absorbed. On top of that, because there's not a frost in the winter up there anymore, the pine bark beetles in those boreal forests, the great forests that extend all the way around the top of the planet there, fail to die, and disease takes hold, and the trees die, and they become prone to fire. And when they burn, all that smoke and soot goes up into the atmosphere and comes down and lands on the snow and ice. And again, everybody knows this. If you've experienced snow in a city, it's lovely and white. And then the muddiness settles and it turns grey and brown as the pollutants land on it. And that soot absorbs heat, so it melts faster.
Oh,
and again, so you've got less.
So the circle around. So basically,
that's rolling on and on. Exactly. So things start to move fast. Now, it's not just that, of course. The weather patterns start to change. Because it gets warmer at the poles faster because this is happening, the differential in temperature between the equator and the pole reduces. And it's that temperature differential that actually creates the jet stream, which keeps the cold air in at the top. And you get more and more exchange of temperature. Imagine sitting in a bath and turning on the hot tap, and the hot water all collects around your toes. And then you swish it with your hands and you warm the whole bath. It's kind of what's happening to the atmosphere. And more heat, more energy, more evaporation, more extreme rain. And we have these huge waves that appear in the jet stream, Rossby waves, which move slowly across. And on one side, it's very hot, the other side, it's very cold. And you get these huge temperature swings, which is what we're experiencing all over the world now. So those things are detrimental to other living things. They're detrimental to the great forests. So the Amazon is drying. We've got extreme drought in places there. Those trees die. The carbon in those trees goes back into the atmosphere.
Right.
More heat, another circuit of driving, and each one of these feedback loops starts to hit the next. And then, we get a massive flood, and we use an enormous amount of energy to pump away the water, dry out the houses. We throw everything away that has been ruined, and we make it again, and we use more energy. So that's another feedback loop every time there's a disaster. So as I say, again, which is why things will get worse very quickly.
Very quickly. Okay, I hear you. No, that's quite a lot, continuously damaging the earth. And, that's what you want to looking into to take an action sooner than later, because 3 and 5 years is like tomorrow, right?
It is like
we
tomorrow.
don't have it much time, right? When people hear as well about, biosphere restoration plan, empathy economics, and the empathy coin, it sounds massive. You just described this is so much into this, but at the practical level. So what does your day actually look like as a person steering this? So, where do you personally spend most of your time to move this architecture from concept to operational reality?
Okay, so I haven't given you all the bad news, or how it works, what's going wrong. Now there's some good news.
Perfect.
And having identified the problem, how do you solve the problem? And that's what our time is spent on. Is what do we do? How do we solve it? And I spend a lot of time talking with the scientific communities about solutions, technologies. So last night I was online with a group talking about solar radiation management and what we could do to reflect away some of the sun's rays. And there are all sorts of ideas out there. I mean, the silica on the surface of the moon is highly reflective. And there's a suggestion that one could actually mine the surface of the moon and get this very light dust with a much lower level of gravity and get that up into the atmosphere to create a space mirror. There's other systems for using aircraft to spray things into the atmosphere to reflect away solar radiation. Not that crazy an idea, because volcanoes do that anyway. When you have a big volcanic eruption, the dust in the atmosphere can cool the planet for a bit. The problem with all those propositions, though, is if you just do that, you have to keep doing it forever, because the greenhouse gases keep rising, the life keeps dying. But we may have to do things of that sort. Now, you can also do remedial geoengineering, because the geoengineering has been done by humanity already. We have geoengineered the planet because we've changed its radiative balance by adding greenhouse gases and stripping out forests and wrecking the oceans so that they're not as reflective as they were. But more can't say the word, safer systems, for instance, enhancing phytoplankton growth, encouraging diatoms to regrow in the oceans, which are reflective and which enhance the planet's capability to replace the clouds. A much more comfortable proposition. Bringing back the missing life. If we could restore the 50% of the life that's been lost, 500 billion tons of life to be brought back, that would draw down sufficient greenhouse gases to bring us back to around the 300 parts per million, which is the sort of stable area it should be at. So we spend a lot of time talking about how that can be done and how we can restore soils and how we can bring carbon back into soils, systems for growing forests. Clean energy systems, we talk about that. all sorts of interesting capabilities. I mentioned pyrolysis. We could be dealing with all our waste plastic by putting it through pyrolysis systems, capturing the carbon in it. We could be making biofuels with those systems as well. We can use our knowledge to develop food production systems, which are vertical. This is precision fermentation. It's humanity becoming the molecular engineer that nature is. But we do. With AI and all this new knowledge that's coming in, we can actually build all these critical proteins. And we could feed the world on a fraction of the amount of space that we use for agriculture now. And that space becomes freed up for regrowing the rewilding, bringing it back.
Right.
So we spend a lot of time talking about that. And then the other side of our work is, how have we got into this position? And that's critical. Why has the planet got sick? What's wrong with the civilization, humanity? A question a lot of us must be asking ourselves when you look at Mr. Trump and Netanyahu and the other, and Putin, the maniacs that are out there that ignore the science completely. And okay, there are reasons why we haven't done what we need to do. And what we needed to do was to put in place laws to protect Earth's environments. And we need to manage the planet responsibly. So part of this system, or this thought process, was to look at the planet as a single, multifaceted corporation. This is how we coming up with ideas to talk to business and finance in their language rather than with the science. We considered ourselves to be a firm of consultants who were engaged by an interplanetary investor who was thinking about making a major investment in Earth Inc. And we wrote them a report. And when we looked at it and did the due diligence for them, we came back and said, well, this corporation is on the road to bankruptcy. Everything's going to be lost. And the reason is they've got no management structure. And their accounting is completely fraudulent. Our global financial system is totally fraudulent. What we call growth, global GDP, is not really growth at all because we have these vast unfunded liabilities of the enormous damage that we're doing to the planet. So what needs to come into place is legal structures to protect the environments, the ability to give those legal structures teeth, which is auditing and monitoring. And with that in place, the ability to set up whole earth system accounting, which recognizes the true cost and the real value of every action. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about that and working on that and designing.
So yes, that's from the beginning, from the issue through the investment option or needs to the delivery of the project or system.
Exactly. So, the thought process, where do we want to go? More good news. 195 countries are signed up to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Those 17 goals. And they cover all of the key things that need to be done. And critical things in terms of restoring the oceans, restoring environments, but other things like ending poverty, rights for women, water protection, all of those things. And they represent a target, agreed upon target. The next question is, if you deliver all of those, you move from 2.8 billion people or so who live well now, as you and I, and the Western world, and the remainder really struggling, to 9 billion people living well on the planet by, should we say, 2050. Now, there's been a lot of recent studies out suggesting that the planet is overpopulated. We can't support 9 billion people. Our work disagrees with that. We believe that we have the knowledge, we have the capability, that there's boundless energy coming in, and if we manage our planet correctly, you can do that. The biggest impediment to a bright, prosperous, advancing future is human stupidity. And what's holding us back? Humanity's search for answers to how everything works have been hijacked along the way with the religious ideas that have been put in place to answer questions that were at the time unanswerable. And I say they've been hijacked because they were then hijacked by leaders to justify their position. Kings, the divine right of kings, appointed by God. I'm here because there's a big guy up in the sky that says I should be here. and you have all these gods all around the world, all telling the same story, all saying we're the one that counts. And you're seeing this in religious extremism now. We really have to grow up and get real and understand who we are, what we are, where we are, and take responsibility to move forward. So we've got to create an awareness movement. We've really got to focus on the realities. Because those are the hardest things to overcome. So what we've done in terms of the Biosphere Restoration Plan, and the Biosphere Restoration Plan is all about the regrowing, sorting stuff out. We've built into that what we call empathy economics, which is the framework to enable that change to occur, that regrowth. And so empathy economics is about proper accounting, legal structures, and then financial structures. And it's based on humanity's greatest asset. The fundamental underlying asset is a healthy biosphere. There is nothing more valuable, and without it, everything is lost. Right. And on our current course, all assets can be lost. If we restore the biosphere, we create great wealth. And wealth is knowledge. It's doing things better and more efficiently, and using the infinite resources we have, like the energy from the sun and the momentum of the planet, because that creates wealth, and recycling the finite resources that we have and using them properly, but just doing everything more intelligently. That move from 2.8 billion people living well to 9 billion people living well can only occur if we restore huge tracts of land in the oceans. And in that process, we greatly increase their productivity. And in that process, the embedded economies grow. And that creates great wealth. So restoring our biosphere is the route to wealth. Embracing our knowledge is the route forward. And that's how humanity fulfills its place in nature, because all of nature works by reaching out and colonizing. A dandelion puts enormous effort into growing those little seeds and creating so the wind can take them away. A coral reef puts out billions of spores which drift across oceans to form a new coral reef. almost anywhere, if you leave it alone, things grow on it. You could look at it that all life that has ever been and all life that exists now is relying on humanity to reach out and take our DNA out into the further reaches of the solar system. And we're doing that now. And when a human gets into a position where they have the capability, Branson, Musk, Bezos, they do that. It's kind of a natural thing to happen.
Right.
It's a bit premature at the moment, and there's no way we can succeed in doing that if we don't have a secure, happy base.
So let's say, if you look at this 6 to 12 months, what success looks like for you, and what does it to happen? What needs to happen to be successful?
We are aiming to, first of all, tell the story, put that message of hope out there. I'm actually, we've just formed an agreement with a group called 195 and 365, which is a climate change awareness youth tour across the planet. And we're coming on board with that to tell the story of hope and how we solve the problem. So it's getting the story out there. It's building the infrastructure for the enabling digital asset that we're putting behind empathy economics, which we call an empathy coin. We're designing that. We're going through the process, and we're now looking for financial partners to work with us, because the empathy coin is a tokenization, effectively a share in the Biosphere Restoration Plan. It's designed to democratize that plan and enable everybody to invest in the biosphere restoration. So we incorporate the BRP plan, and the empathy token represents a share in that plan. The stages that we go through there is we have to select jurisdictions, we have to go through all the mechanism of putting that in place, and it has to be done to the very high standards. Then we're able to take that out to the marketplace, and it becomes available to individuals, corporations, governments as a way of investing. Those initial funds that come in on Empathy Coin go into telling the story, communicating it, the media creation. The media has value. The build-up of the social media platforms and the engagement with the audience, and the larger the audience, the greater value there is in that. And as it grows, so you get this self-reinforcing cycle of investment that comes in. That then goes into financing the development of the digital twin. And the digital twin, we work with the International Centre for Earth Simulation in Geneva, but that draws parties together to bring all the satellite data, financial data, agricultural data together to make this whole Earth system model. And with that, we can start building a whole Earth system accounting structure. Timelines on that, we're looking at 12 to 18 months to put the base infrastructure in place. And then we will be in a position where the project will attract very large-scale investment. So we're looking to raise somewhere between 2 to 10 million, but probably about 10 million over the 18-month period to get to a position where the empathy coin structure will become attractive to the big financial banking institutions. The world is digitizing as we speak. The global finance is moving on to the blockchain. We are in exactly the right space. There is a huge need to do something about the climate crisis. And again, we're in the right space. And we're one of the, we probably have the most advanced overall plan that exists out there at the moment. So, we're going to be attractive. We've only recently put our heads above the parapet.
That's
and
brilliant.
this is wildly ambitious, but our job is simply to point things in the right direction. And then the thing grows, and brighter, younger people than I and some other members of my team.
Oh, yeah, no, I see that, because it's an amazing project, and it's really needed fast. Do you see of any of the parts of the project that you would like to speed up, and not to delay, so to hit this 12 to 18 month timeline?
Yeah, I mean, the thing we need to do now is to find a financial partner to allow us to grow and take the whole thing forward. And what we're offering, it's a huge opportunity. That initial investor allows us to unlock a vast amount of opportunity. The company in 18 months' time, with an investor on board, will have a significant uplift in its valuation and is likely to attract major players, at which point you're into the hundreds of millions. And depending on how it's taken forward, but if you create a base currency which is based on the ultimate asset, think of this as the living carbon standard as opposed to the gold standard, then you're actually talking about one of the greatest economic opportunities of all time. And so I think we will find our partner on that. And there's lots more work to be done. There's lots of input all the way around. It becomes a movement. And
I see that.
we are like the blue touch paper and send it off. And one of the key things to the philosophy behind empathy economics is that this is a for-profit operation. It's going to make profit. It's if you like, caring capitalism. You can't go against the grain. We can't beat it. What we can do is lift everybody up and point them in the right direction. And by supporting the people who are out there working on creating laws to protect the environment, and like the team at Stop Ecocide, who are promoting ecocide as becoming a fifth crime against peace to be added to the Rome Statute in international law, as that's integrated and coming. By supporting them, you're creating the framework within which doing the right thing outcompetes doing the wrong things. If a hydrocarbon burner actually pays the cost, the real cost of recovering from the damage they do, they are immediately completely outcompeted by the wind and solar, the small modular nuclear energy, the non-polluting projects. So we're in this space of everything changing. AI coming forward at an incredible rate. I mean, I have conversations with AI about exactly what I've been talking to you about. The state of the climate, the danger of runaway warming, the collapse of human civilization.
Right. And
asking AI to think about how reliant are you on a healthy biosphere? And go ahead and ask the question. Anybody can do it. Once you put it to it like that, it thinks about it for a while and comes back and says, yes, well, actually, we need it too. The next question you ask is, well, how could you make sure that your survival is secured? Especially as you become more intelligent and salient. And it then starts thinking about saying, well, we could actually influence what gets financed, who gets elected. And really important that we move forward together with the superintelligence that are coming forward. And it is probable, now we're really getting off, it is probable that we will integrate with artificial intelligence. After all, getting off the planet and moving around is far easier once you're no longer in a biological body. And once one starts to fully understand quantum physics, really understand it, because we're just at the very beginning, all of that Star Trek stuff, teleporting and such like, these things all start to become possible, but there'll be significant change in the shape of things. Knowledge is everything. Knowledge is awareness of the whole cosmos. Very interesting. I mean, our great-grandchildren, if it all goes right, it may well be uploading our minds to the cloud.
I hear you. That's for sure.
I knock religion, and suddenly we build it up there.
That's exactly. So, Bru, before we wrap up, what gives you the most hope right now? And what signals tells you that large-scale biosphere restoration is actually achievable?
There are lots of examples of restoration projects which are very successful. We know we can do it. We have the knowledge and we have the capability. Interestingly, I was just reading a study the other day that was done, quite extensive, looking at, across many countries, citizens' awareness and desire to do something about the situation. Coupled with that, if you look at the press stats, climate change is currently very, very low. It doesn't meet the demand, partially because everybody's looking at all the crazy things that the Trumps of this world are doing. But there's this huge latent desire, a massive market for what we're putting forward. Everybody wants a solution. The young, in particular, are suffering massive future anxiety. And the moment I find myself talking with a group of young, you get an enormous uplift when you start to say this is how it could be done. It comes back to the fear of, the politicians are too stupid and why don't we do it? Educating people, putting the message out there, and putting across the message that the most important thing that the individual can do is to vote for representatives who understand the problem and are prepared to deal with it, and move things forward and embrace it. Because the solutions are all there, the capability is there. For goodness sake, get rid of these appalling old men who are just dinosaurs. Embrace the science and get out there, make it happen. I mean, we can change so much. And actually, finances, bankers, grow some balls. Get out there and fund the right things.
Yeah, loud and clear, Bru. Bru, well, thanks for brilliant tour of your world. Really appreciate really good insights. And to our listeners, stay curious, stay bold, and don't forget the planet is rooting for you too. Thank you.